I remember not hearing anything, and like I'm literally at a Phillies Cubs game, and I checked my, I didn't think they emailed me. I just checked like ESPN. I was like, holy crap, I think my story's up on ESPN.
Gang, here we are at the podium yet again. Today, I have a special friend, nearly 20-year relationship, definitely more than 15, close to 20. My good buddy, Andy Frye. Andy, who was in the business I was in 15, 20 years ago, woke up one day and said, you know what? I'm going to go back to the dreams I had in fourth grade when I wrote my very first sports-related article called Chess Champs for the Blair Mill Elementary newspaper. Today, Andy's not only an incredible father, he's a friend. Andy is a sports writer. He's written for Forbes, ESPN, and Rolling Stones. And most recently, and congrats, my friend, you've authored the new book, 90 Days in the 90s, which just dropped here in June. Congrats again. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Manny. Thanks for having me. After all these years, I could tell that neither one of us can count, but that's okay.
I know.
I think I left the business in 2000. Well, the registered rep business, 2011. I sold some currencies for a while, like real ones, not crypto or anything. And I was like, the whole time I was just trying to keep myself sane. I remember passing on to you a couple of blogs I wrote that you and like 6 of my friends read, and then kind of blossomed from there. I can talk about the road and so on, but sometimes your hobbies become your profession. Provided you're not like a bird watcher or a circus juggler, I guess. But
look, what I love the best when we kind of just loosely stayed in touch, right? In all reality, we've just loosely stayed in touch, and I've enjoyed watching you. I mean, you used to be one of the best dressed suits in the firm in Northern Chicago. Always had the best tie on, and I just remember you would never button it to the top. But I love how you transitioned from that financial advisor or registered rep to literally going back to a dream you had as a child.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that the first article you wrote was in the 4th grade for your elementary school. That this show is all about listening to the stories, sharing the stories around the wins, losses, and lessons of high performance people in sports, business, and life. And we talk about dreaming so often and who's in your corner, empowering you to pursue those dreams.
Yeah.
What was it? What happened? Because you were doing well in financial services. What happened that said, you know what, I'm making this hard 180-degree pivot and I'm going to attack that dream?
Well, I guess you're conveniently forgetting the issues, personal otherwise that I had with underwriters, slowing me down and stuff. But I won't repeat what I said in some of the meetings. I remember you said to me, so what do you think about underwriters this month, Frye? I won't repeat what I said about them. But yeah, I mean, I guess, it's sort of like you have a hobby or an inclination. And I think most people, and your hobby can be, building birdhouses. Like I used to live down the block from an old guy who's retired. He's like a union plumber who retired like 35 years ago. And he makes, we call it cornhole or bags. He makes like high-end cornhole, those decks with the holes in them. That's about the size of my desk. And you can get like Bears one, Bulls one. He probably doesn't know any bands, but I said, like, if I said, can you make me a Grateful Dead one or a Dave Matthews Band one or a Ramones one, he probably would find a way to do it. And he charged me $200 to do it with, the wood and the paint. So I think whatever your passion or what, kind of what helps you let your hair down can be. I give you a bad Cubs reference. I just saw yesterday that Kyle Farnsworth, who pitched for the Cubs back in the late 90s, 2000s, is like a bodybuilder now. So, of course, when I saw that on Instagram, I thought, well, I hope he's a better bodybuilder than he was a pitcher, relief pitcher with the Cubs. But
yeah, he's like a closer, right?
No, he was like a middle reliever. He was like the first. Okay. He was like a big athletic guy that could have an awesome 3 innings. And then sometimes like he'd be pitching, he'd be like had goose egg, like basically no runs, no hits. And then he would scoop it up and like completely miss the first baseman and throw it. Like I remember during the Cubs Sox game, my wedding weekend, 2001, we beat the Sox, your team, 11-1 on that Sunday. But I remember the one time he picked it up and people were like, no, 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 no. And he threw it in the stands. And I was like 20 rows back. It could have hit me in the head. But the point is, like, that guy's still doing things that he loves. Obviously, he can't pitch forever. He can't play baseball forever. He played for a long time. But, somewhere along the lines, whether we knew it or not, he was into bodybuilding and, keeping fit or whatever. And eventually you just either staple a competitive impulse to that, competitive impulse with yourself, or you just, you have more time in your hands or more, financial means or whatever. And you just start doing a little bit more of what you love. Hopefully, it doesn't really matter what it is, brewing beer, making arts and crafts, quilts. I don't know. For me, I guess the fourth grade story suggests that I was always a bit of a writer. I always had, I never really originally considered myself a good storyteller, but at least I was like nutty crazy for chess in the fourth grade. And like all of us were playing it. So I don't think I posted that article onto my website, but like, it was a big deal. It was, winter. It was 20 degrees out in the winter in 1982. Yeah, 1982 or so. And it was just such a big deal that, when someone said, we have a school newspaper, you want to write something? I was like, I got to write about this. So, yeah, I mean, I think passions have a way to kind of seep out, even if we work 60 hours a week and something we like or we don't like. And you just got to kind of embrace it, I think, and see where it goes.
Well, I mean, it reminds me, first of all, I love the fact that you just told like 5 stories on one question. Farnsworth, though, if I remember correctly, because listen, I'm a Southside kid, diehard Chicago White Sox, ride or die forever. Yeah. I think Farnsworth had like kind of like a half mullet, right? Like kind of like heavy, like longer hair in the back or something strange or unique, not strange, unique.
I don't remember. I mean, I remember Kevin Tapney had a little bit of something like that, but Kevin Tapney's thing was he'd pitch a perfect 3 innings and then he would literally melt down in the 5th and put like 18 people on base. People always talk about Kevin Tapney. He's like, oh, he's a great pitcher. I'm like, yeah, until the 4th or 5th. And then he was, oh my God, I got to leave the ballpark. Nothing personal against the guy, but he was a great 3-inning pitcher. I think he had a little, and there was Rod Beck definitely had a mullet. He's no longer with us, I think, but yeah, I think Farnsworth was probably like, I heard stories about him that he'd like show up to your crappy bar at 2 a.m, or he would get his, I don't know if it's true, get his haircut at like Sport Clips or like the hair cuttery. He's just like a nuts and bolts kind of guy.
Yeah.
I never met him or interviewed him, but I mean, I think he liked Wrigleyville. So I would be surprised if like, he skipped a season and didn't get a haircut, had a mullet. I just don't really remember that. I thought you were going to say when you're touching back your head, I thought you were going to say he had Vaseline on the back of his cap. And I thought you were going to make a charge there, but no. We can talk about corked bats later if you want to bring up Sosa.
Chicago. Yeah. I was going to say the north side, not the south side. Hey, no one ever accused Carlton Fisk of cork bats. Let me pivot. So right. Career, you were in sales, you were in marketing, you were in technology. I mean, like I love understanding, and so do our listeners, the folks who listen on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Like they love hearing someone's journey to the podium. And I mean that. Like you have made this is your calling. You are great at this. I mean, we just joked offline that you have this opportunity with this like high profile, probably one of the best 100 athletes of our time across all professional sports. And you're not going to be able to do the interview. And you said that, and I'm over here crying, thinking like, I wish someone called me and said, hey, can you interview this gentleman? But anyway, sales, marketing, IT, and now you're a sports writer, and this is the calling. This is it. I mean, talk to our listeners, share the story kind of your path. And really, what was the epiphany though? What was the epiphany? What was the thing that said, this is the golden ticket for my happiness for the rest of my life? Well,
I've never really looked at, because sales is really just entrepreneurship. And I've always been a freelance sports writer, never been in the building at ESPN. Like I bump into people at ABC and Chicago, like, oh, you're in the building. I'm like, well, no, I've never been in the building. I don't need to go to the building, especially after a pandemic. But I've never considered like the entrepreneurial part and the writing part not related, because actually like my first job out of college was basically did sales for a bank, and we did kind of second mortgages for this bank, Midwestern bank, that didn't really have the best rates, and help people with that didn't have the best credit, but they weren't like loan sharks or anything. We did a lot of home improvement loans and consolidation loans, so you got to be a little more assertive. with a bank like that. So I kind of went from like, nice kid who's maybe a little bit of a wimp when it came to addressing people to like, having to follow up and be straight with people and say, here's your options, choose one, or, here's how we can come to the table. So, yeah, it's entrepreneurship and just sort of being able to speak up and say what you want. And then also combine that. So I built similarly to like when I was in sales, I built pretty much the same relationships as a sports writer, freelance sports writer, as I did when I was, selling currencies or insurance or investments. And you're probably thinking like, oh, I must have relationships with professional athletes. It's not so much that, it's more with publicists. And so, back when I was working for Country Financial for you and you had gone out on your own to kind of start your own agency, I think I was still there and I was just trying to keep myself sane. This is probably circa 2008 or so. A friend of mine who knows me from a long time ago knew that I knew a lot about sports and I liked it. And then she said, you should start a blog. And I said, I think I know what a blog is. So, you just I went to blogger.com and would write this thing. And, it kind of just started that way, like circling around. It's like, hey, friends at home, read this, tell me what you think, comment, whatever. And I never looked at like how many clicks I got because I didn't want to get discouraged if I had like 12 readers. But, that, and I was also in the Rotary Club for a while, Rotary Club of Chicago. And someone handed me the job of doing the weekly newsletter because we met on Tuesdays. So long story short, like I actually like took pride in both those things. That I edited it. I made interesting stories. I remember one year during April Fool's Day, April Fool's Day was on a Tuesday, and I wrote an April Fool's edition. And I emailed the whole club at midnight saying that this was 2008. So I basically literally took an article on Bear Stearns melting down and liquidating, replaced Bear Stearns with Rotary, and then sent it like to the whole chapter saying like Rotary's being taken over by a Lions Club. And I had like 2 people say, oh, that's pretty damn funny. I won't tell anybody. But even the next day, I'm getting in the elevator and someone's like, did you see the email last night? I'm like, you mean the April Fool's joke? Really, bro? And I got to the main floor and like I was welcomed by people laughing with smiles. And then the president of the chapter was not happy. He's like, can I talk to you? I need to talk to you. But long story short, I took that like it was, I didn't get paid for that. I didn't get much pat on the back, but like that little thing, writing a newsletter weekly, I just made it my own. And maybe I'm just sort of, I tend to geek out on like writing emails and things like memos and things that are just like, I want them to read well. And that was just something, that's probably the thing I've always had. So combine that with a subject that I want to write about. I think that's where the writing piece of it came. And then literally, I think just sink or swim in sales and financial services. You meet a business owner and you want to connect with them. You don't stalk them outside their house and try to sell them product first. You try to build a relationship if you know what you're doing, knowing that you might get a really awesome sale 6 months down the road, or you might get a small sale. And then they say, hey, talk to my brother who's worth $80 million. His agent from whatever company is terrible and he fired him. So, you got to look, I look at small opportunities. And, with the writing piece, I was writing about sometimes I joke about like log tossing and midget wrestling and stuff, but that's kind of what it was in the beginning. I remember getting an invite to, someone told me I could get a media pass to the Air Guitar Championships, which were in Chicago at Metro in like 2010. And I went to it, of course. I covered the whole thing for my blog. But eventually I got some opportunities with some PR people started noticing some of what I was writing. And maybe I had built some relationships with other writers who maybe sent things my way. And I can tell you the story about when I met probably the first famous athlete, the first professional athlete I met and interviewed in person, actually at all, was Matt Forte from Chicago Bears. So, it really blossomed from there. People see that article, then other publicists are like, well, hey, I got, XYZ athlete, you want to interview them, let's set something up. And now I'm getting like 20 pitches a week. And so it's really like entrepreneurship plus passion plus being organized and, really just, even if you're doing a stupid little thing that you don't think anybody's going to read, you put your heart into it because that's how you are, good things happen, I think.
Yeah, I love, first of all, I love the examples. I have to do this though, because this is a picture of myself and Matt Forte at Bill Rancic's, one of his charitable fundraisers that Samantha and I attended. And And I was so excited. I had already known and met, a few dozen players for the Chicago Bears over about a half decade at that time. And
Huh.
I was just so excited to meet him. And I never, ever asked people if I could take a photo. And I vividly recall Samantha was like, I don't care. I'm going to tell him you like him and you want to take a photo.
Yeah.
And she just walked over and he was so kind. And at that time, my children, Ava and Atlas, were really young and they
Mhm.
would call him Dad, Deuce, Deuce. They'd be like, Deuce, Deuce is on. Deuce,
Yeah.
Deuce carried the ball. Deuce, Deuce got a tutty, Dad. And I
Yeah.
just, vividly remember, what was it like to interview him and spend a little bit of time with him?
Well, it was cool. So it was, I don't think it was 2011. Whatever was the last year that Trestman was coach. So it was
What a horror story of a movie
sorry.
that is.
Well, the reason I remember this, it was bye week. They were doing pretty well. So I got to go up to Hallis Hall, which was, amazing to get to do that. I got an email from somebody in New York who's a kind of a junior publicist. I don't even think she's in the business. Her name is Christina something. And I think now she's like, her passion was to be like an audiologist because I think she babysat like a hearing impaired kid when she was little, but she got out of college, kind of did what she thought she should do in PR. And anyway, she found me. I think she was looking for a Chicago blogger or somebody who did a little bit of writing. And it was, she knew that she wasn't going to get like Rick Morrissey or David Huff here or somebody who was kind of more established, because the story was that there was a web series called Tough Season. And so it's a web comedy. There's a couple of Chicago improv comedy guys and professional athletes. Long story short, the plot is, imagine you and me and Matt Forte and Wes Welker and Eli Manning, like we're all in a fantasy football league and we're super hyper competitive about it. And I want to beat Eli Manning and I want to talk crap with him about how I whipped his team. That's what it was. So Matt Forte was kind of like the more quiet of a couple of professional athletes that they had. So they were promoting the season 2 of Tough Season, and they basically said go up to Hallis Hall, after practice or before practice, whatever it was, get to meet with them. So sponsored by Lenovo, the laptop people, because they were bankrolling it. So anyway, I got to go up there. I got to go. He's like 6'1". He's like lean and he's like thin for a football player. That was kind of weird. Like, wow, you're really lean, dude. Like he's not bulky, which I guess is, helps your speed or whatever. And he was super nice. He was kind of quiet but funny. And I asked him about his sense of humor, and he talked about a scene in which he was wearing a grass skirt and he's like daydreaming about being on I think he's like in a meeting talking about football and fantasy football, and he really doesn't want to be there. So he starts daydreaming about being on a beach dancing like grass skirts. We got a clip of that video where he's like literally hula grass skirt. He's wearing his Bears jersey. And he was like super nice. I spent like a half an hour with him just taking notes and recording.
Love it.
Then that was a bye week. The next week they had the Packers, and pretty much they got destroyed by the Packers, and they had all the drama in the locker room and everything went down from there.
Yeah.
And then Trestman was out before the end of that season, I think. But
I remember that season actually vividly, just to be clear.
So I think people saw that. I wrote it for Red Eye, which is part of the Chicago Tribune. It was a daily then. He's basically a sports and entertainment daily, kind of like light stories, not super deep stuff for the most part. And that, I think, some PR people saw that, and I started getting some emails here and there like, hey, I saw you did this. Do you want to talk to, and it was a lot of, at the time, it was a lot of like CEOs starting sports related, startups, or I think at some point, maybe a year later, I got to talk to Ryan Howard, who, played with the Phillies, and some players that were kind of at the end of their careers. And then, now it's, as you probably know, I've interviewed Shaq twice in the last year. I've interviewed Lindsey Vonn 3 times.
Yeah. And I want to come back to this list of high profile, high performance people in sports business and life. But
sure.
let me stay on the career just for one more question. Okay. I've heard you, because a lot of our listeners are folks that are following us on Instagram, at the Podium podcast, and they're looking not only for, information and content that's entertaining, but they also want to hear about things that could be relevant or applicable or helpful to where they're at in life. And so one of the things that I think about is I've heard you recognize that your early careers in sales and even financial services helped to develop certain skill sets or improve certain skills you had.
Yeah.
That have now proved to be very helpful to you as a sports writer and someone who, I know you don't call yourself a storyteller, but you're helping to tell people stories, share their stories.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about a few of those skill sets that you acquired in sales, in financial services, that you've now found have been very relevant to this very different career?
Yeah, it's a lot of like, I mean, I think it's a lot of what we call the soft skills side, like just following up with people and so for example, and also like, don't burn bridges, build relationships. I mean, you don't always get what you want. I've known other freelance sports writers that like pitch 5 baseball stories a month, and then when they get, the second or third or eighth no, that they lash out at the editor at, whatever publication they're writing because they're pissed off, and then they burn that bridge. Like, don't do that. That's pretty much common sense, I think.
Go back to the follow-up though, because I've heard you say this before. I think it's gold to any professional in life. Follow-up. Talk about that.
Yeah, follow up. Yeah, it's I think the first time I started, I had a connection with an editor who didn't really know me at ESPN. So I was writing for Page Two. If you remember Page Two, it was kind of funny stories and videos. It was like the not serious stuff that was
the light.
You basically, you're not working at work and you're looking at it on the web. So I kind of figured out, I think I'm pretty perceptive, and I kind of just, without them telling me, like, figure out like the big 4 sports, they got staffers. They're not going to take anything from me on baseball, football, basketball, hockey, because they don't need that. I found this sports, or maybe someone contacted me about the sport called fistball, which is basically it's kind of like a variant of volleyball that's played. There's a World Cup and it's played in Scandinavia and Brazil. And then I found there's this little ragtag team in Wisconsin. And so anyway, I pitched that story and followed up, and I thought, well, he's not going to be interested in this. I mean, they don't know who these guys are. But they said, yes. So it was like, if you want to do the story, I'm interested in no more than 500 words, get some video, have it by this date, or have something by this date. And I made sure it was polished and it was perfect. And it was, I think the editor maybe offered me like $75. It wasn't a lot for the story, but I'm like, if it's ESPN, I'll do it. So yeah, I basically put together my plan, kind of previewed what I was going to ask these athletes. And, it was as quirky as Page Two, ESPN Page Two was at the time, where literally I'm talking to the captains of the USA national fistball team and he's smoking a cigarette. Like, that doesn't happen if you talk to, Megan Rapinoe, who's, in the middle of a World Cup, or, so that was kind of, it sort of worked out. And then I remember not hearing anything. And like, I'm literally at a Phillies Cubs game. And I checked my, I didn't think they emailed me. I just checked like ESPN. I was like, holy crap, I think my story's up on ESPN. It was like first week of July in 2011. So like on that, I had other ideas, and, I do what's called, I'm gonna write about this in a book someday, the 100-word pitch. Because the few times when I was in financial services and I would email people to follow up, or because I met them or whatever, I know that you and I, we don't have time to read 6-page emails. And we open up our email, we see a huge paragraph. It's like words. Oh, I'll come back to it later, and then we don't. But if it's a punchy subject line that isn't too salesy or cheesy, and there's a 50 to 100 words, it's like, okay, I can read this real quick. Some sort of expediters of what do I have to read, what do I not have to read. And I just started applying. I worked a couple of times to set up appointments when I was in sales, but it started working more when I was pitching editors who don't know who the heck I am. I could be like, just a subject or a name of a famous person who had something tangentially sports related. They're doing it in Chicago. I'd pitch them. And if they didn't follow up the next day, I would follow up. If I had someone's phone number, I would leave a message politely. I'm not going to stalk them, but yeah, I think it's one of those things that people think, well, product is what sells things, or, you got to have connections. Yeah, that's true too. But I really think that reaching out and following up is the most important thing. I'll give you a little story. So a couple of years ago, I had a friend who was, I think, editing for Hearst, which Hearst has, like, my dream publication would be to write for Esquire. She got to go ahead to, I think it was Ronda Rousey just got knocked out by Holly Holm. I may have the athletes.
I remember that fight.
Yeah. So it was like, oh yeah, I got the green light to write an article for Esquire if I can just locate Holly Holm and interview her, which I'm like, dude, that's awesome. So So she messaged me. She's like, "Do you know anybody at UFC?" And I was like, "I don't think so, but let me ask around." And a bit literally later that afternoon, someone who hooked me up with, strangely, Cubs fan and Rage Against the Machine guitarist Tom Morello was like, "Yeah, talk to this person at UFC." Gave me their name, gave me their phone number, gave me their email, and I sent it back to my friend. I was like, "Okay, you're writing for Esquire. You're not writing for the Podunk News out in Ames, Iowa, or whatever it is. Like, this is a real good publication. Nothing against Podunk News." And I said, "Okay, email
You're
this
like,
guy."
this one is good. This
Yeah.
is Esquire. This one's good.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to write for Esquire. I'm not quite there. So I was like, and it might have been just digital edition, but I literally said, like, email this guy. He's like the calmest person at Ultimate Fighting Championship. Call him, leave a message. When he doesn't respond in a day, email him again, call him back. Because it's like, you're not trying to sell him an insurance policy. You're like trying to interview the top athlete right now that they probably want to talk about, who just did this amazing thing. And I think about a month later, I asked her, I was like, "So whatever happened with that?" She's like, "Oh, I emailed him, but he never emailed me back." I'm like, "Come on, really? You didn't call the guy?" So, I think that was a lost opportunity. And I know that some people have different comfort zone than I do, but you got to ask what you want in life. And you got to follow up once or twice. I mean, to give you another example, a few years ago, you might remember on opening day, Major League Baseball decided all the ball clubs were going to play on opening day, March 29th. They're all going to play the same day. It was the first time in history. So Kingsford Charcoal had this commercial. They had one in Spanish with David Ortiz, but the one with Johnny Bench was like, literally, I thought this was funny. You think it's funny. Sitting at a desk, cold calling fans. Like, "Hey, you're going to be there opening day. You're going to be there opening day." Like, hanging up. He's smiling and dialing. And it was a Friday. I saw that. I thought, I wonder if I find the PR person who put out the press release, or find Kingsford PR's comms person. I bet if I stalk them a little bit, they'll either tell me no, or I'll get an interview with Johnny Bench. And I found the person. I found like the press release on, like, I don't know, Business Wire or something, with the person's name under it. He emailed them Friday, got back to me Tuesday. He's like, "Yeah, we can get Johnny Bench on the phone for you for about 10 minutes or so." He's like, "If you want to mention Kingsford Charcoal, great, but just talk to him about, like, grilling out, because he loves grilling out." And
Dude.
we're gonna talk about baseball with the guy. So, he told me how he does steaks. We kind of talked about what we like and we don't like. He told me, I think at the time he had like 2 teenagers, or maybe like 2 college age kids at home. He's like, "I cook all their hot dogs and stuff, so then I can get them out of my face and cook my steaks the way that I, with my special rub." And so I had this great conversation with Johnny Bench. All he had to do is, like, find the person who was repping the brand that's probably spending $10 million a weekend on commercial.
Yeah.
They paid him. They probably want to use him. So, if you're someone who's a little bit more introverted and you think, well, they don't know me, or why would they, just suck it up and see what you want. There's other examples I can make that are outside of sports, but whenever you want to set up a power partnership, or a sales relationship, or a relationship of any sort, or even just get an interview, sometimes you got to just find the right person and reach out to them. And the worst thing they could say is no, or never respond to you. But usually if you follow up once, they'll say, yeah. Let's talk about it, or no, it can't do it, or yes, or whatever. You're going to get some sort of reply. You just got to put together that, I think it's like putting your shoes on. You just got to, like, do some of those things every day.
Just do it
To get what you want in life. And you'll be surprised how, then you start building a rep, and then people start reaching out to you. Like, I didn't go to journalism school. I'm not famous, but I got to interview some cool people. So I think it's a building process. Just like,
so let me try to summarize, because look, I think you gave a ton of career advice in there.
Yeah, a little
just
too much
by sharing stories and examples, things you've lived, right? Let me attempt to summarize a couple of the things that I wrote down. So first of all, I wrote down that relationships really are the foundation to being successful in any new endeavor. So, hey, you believe in yourself, you believe in your passion, you're willing to take the risk. Now you got to make sure that you are aware of people and the significance of a good relationship. And that means, like, don't burn a bridge if no is the first initial response, because you don't have any street credibility. Or, like, my favorite thing to say is, like, like the mafia movies, don't send somebody nobody sent. Well, you're sent by nobody right now. Yeah. You got to be okay with the fact that you might hear no 8 to 10 times first time around.
Yeah.
Second thing I'm hearing stay consistent, be resilient, stay consistent. Just stay consistent to what you said you were going to do. I think of books like the Game of Numbers by Nick Murray. Like it really does come down to being consistently disciplined around the activity. Third thing I'm hearing you say is follow through. Follow up, follow through, follow up, follow through, follow up, follow through. And really in that, what I also heard is don't quit on your passions.
Yeah.
Like if you just do those first three things and you don't quit, eventually it comes around and people start seeking you out as someone who can add value. How did I do?
Good. Yeah. And I would just add one thing. I always say to people, become a local.
Say that again.
Become a local.
Become a
What
local.
I mean by that, I used to work at the Board of Trade. So locals were what they call the people who actually are in the pit who trade like pork bellies or whatever. I actually mean it in two ways. I'm in Chicago, you can see the L train is on the front of my book there. I know it's going to appeal to like Gen Xers and people who love music because it's all about like this person who goes back in time to kind of straighten out her stuff in the 90s, but then she gets lost hanging out in the 90s and has too much fun. I know that, there are people that I know who know people who maybe will have heard of the book or will have heard of the bands or the venues. So I'm kind of working the Chicago route, and people who don't know me, as an author, and people who might not have read my sports stuff because they don't read sports. Or I want to kind of get them to know me organically. So when I was in sales, to give you an example, I became a local when I was selling currencies. Somewhere in the data, we had this big database, and one day I typed in the word yacht, and I saw we had 2 accounts. I was like, really? There's got to be like a lot of euros and pounds that I could sell to people who deal with yachts, which are pretty friggin' expensive. So I started to become a local. I mean, I don't live in Miami, but I did a couple of business trips down there. And to tell you a story, like I actually got accounts. You remember those chocolates that they make in Chicago called Frangos? They used to sell them at Marshall Fields, and now Macy's sells them.
Yes.
I literally transported 13 boxes of Frangos and stopped by offices of people who had opened accounts and not done much business. Or like I talked to them on the phone 2 or 3 times, but they were kind of blowing me off, or they, I want to show them like I'm the real deal. I'm going to be in town. Oh, here's a $14 box of chocolates that'll blow your mind. And then, I had people like respond to me after that, and they think that, oh, maybe he has a condo down here in Miami, or maybe he's just he's a local. He knows yachts, and he knows I love chocolate. I actually had one person place a trade for pounds. I think I made $25 off of it, and then the assistant said send more chocolates, which I did. And then the next trade they did was like an $8,000 trade, so commission for me. So follow up, become a local, be authentic, I think is the thread that runs through that. Like I'm not just going to show up and drop chocolates off if I don't like the guy. I don't really want to earn his business, but I want all that. So
wait.
Same thing. What?
Time out. Why do we even have to talk about that last point anymore?
I don't know.
Seriously, Andy, like, look, let's unpack that for a second.
All right.
Why do people still sell books on authenticity? How is this like eye-opening light bulb? This is not a light bulb moment. This is not an Alexander Graham like telephone moment. Like this is not it. It's not the Wright brothers teaching us how to fly a plane. Like why do we still? Why isn't it just understood to be authentic?
I don't know. I think that authenticity is a Gen X generational thing that my generation sort of obsessed with. But, in the 80s, you and I grew up in the 80s, and we all, fake until you make it. And I think that there's a lot of value inadvertently put on, like, you got to be Steve Jobs to be successful. I look stupid in a black turtleneck. So, and I know technology to some degree, but that's not me. I was in IT for a while, and I never was going to be. I made good money while I was in IT, but I wasn't going to be like the next Steve Jobs. So it's okay to kind of take opportunities and make what you can with them and then transform to something else. Or like you work for Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs, but you really kind of want to run your own agency, your own shop. It's okay to decamp. People do that all the time. You can reinvent your own story and your own business footprint. I don't know why. I think we were just in the 20th century, we're sort of deputized in a bad way. If you're going to be in business, that you got to be like Gordon Gekko, or you got to be like, I don't know, or Max Headroom or whatever. You got to have this. We all got to wear the same suit and look like, I don't know. I I mean, you and I are both unshaven right now, and we're not. I think neither one of us are losing business or clients. So I think that kind of speaks. And I watch Ari Melber at MSNBC sometime. That dude's never shaven, and he's dropping like
never.
He's dropping like Wu-Tang references. He referenced MF Doom yesterday, and nobody's going to go, oh, I don't know who the Wu-Tang Clan is. Click, I'm going to go watch CNN. Like people just, I think, if you're authentic, people enjoy you, and it makes your job easier. I guess that's my answer. Be authentic. It makes it a lot easier. You can come into somebody's office and say, oh, you have a lovely office. Or you can be like, hey, what'd you think about the Cubs game? Or I know you're a Sox fan. Sox suck. What do you have to say about that? Like, you can be authentic within the realm of what you're comfortable with. And if you're not a jokey guy like you or I are, there's probably some way you can just be relatable to people. And I think that just makes life easier and more enjoyable. That's what I think.
First of all, three references I love. First of all, I've not read it, but I'm excited for the book, and I want to talk about that in a few minutes.
Okay.
Number two, I love the Gordon Gekko reference. So for like 10 years of my life, there was a Christmas where a very dear person in my life gave me Glengarry Glen Ross, Wall Street, and Boiler Room on DVD as my Christmas present.
And you're wearing suspenders right now too. So.
Say it again.
And you're wearing suspenders right now.
And I'm wearing suspenders right now. So I turned around. I was like, do I have that in my bookshelf? But I don't. Third thing, though, I love the Ari Melber reference. I like him. I like his style. I like the interviews. I like the guests. He just had Scooter Braun on. Did you see that?
I think I missed that one.
Okay. So it's fire. Look, I don't know Scooter well, but I'm consistently impressed with what the content I see online. So I don't know what the life's like, right? But what I see online, I'm consistently impressed by this young man. He's interviewing Scooter Braun. They both have facial hair all over the place. Yeah. Nobody's saying a thing about it. And yet, right, we still have experienced a number of moments where people are like, why aren't you shaving? What's that about too? I mean, being authentic, you got to still say it. Shaving, you have to do it. What's that about?
Yeah, I don't know. You're too busy moving and shaking to shave, I guess. I remember reading a line in Esquire years ago saying something like, somebody was describing their life as like an upcoming professional. And anyway, I remember this line was like, as a man, I'm having much too fun to fit shaven. This man is having much too fun in life to ever be fully shaven. And that should be a name of a movie or a book, but I don't remember who wrote it. It was a while ago.
All right, let's start to unpack some of the recent people that you've interviewed. At least let's look at the last 5 years. I'm gonna give you a description, all right, and then I want you to share the first one that comes to mind and explain why.
All right.
Which was the most uncomfortable interview you've done with someone in sports?
I don't really have a lot of those, but Ash Barty, who just retired, she's the world #1 in tennis. She's just kind of like, I've had a few of these, mostly like not famous athletes, where you say and I'm not super pretentious. I'm not Jim Gray. I don't say tell me your secrets about how you win. I just say, I'm interested. You're always killing it out there. Talk about your prep for either, a rival or a big, bigger. I think I said how do you prepare for the big matches and the little ones? And she's like, I don't know. I don't really think about it. Just do it. And that was her answer, 4 things.
Just do it.
And I was kind of like, really, dude, thanks a lot. I got the same answer. I don't know. I don't think about it. And the only really interesting thing she said was that she's a homebody. Because I think I got to so what do you do when you're not winning tennis champions? What do you do for fun? I don't know. I just hang out with my cousins or my nephews or whatever. And it's so what do you like? And then I thought it was weird. So I want to say so what do you do with them? I'm not going to ask her about taking her nephew to the park because that sounds creepy. I was like, okay, well, if it's all right. Well, I guess I'm just going to have to write more. The question and answers part of my interview is shorter, and I'll just write more about our accomplishments. So, that was uncomfortable. It was just more like someone who is such a great athlete that has nothing they want to share. I don't know. I just get up every day to do the same thing. No, you don't.
Who's the one that you interviewed and you were just like, man, I wish that didn't end so quick. That was so much fun. I wish that didn't end so quick.
So I'm, politically, I'm kind of a centrist, and I got to interview, and I'm a diehard Cubs fan. I got to interview Adam Wainwright, who's a lifer for the Cardinals, and he doesn't tweet about it, but I know he's probably a conservative Christian. He's pretty conservative. I don't eat meat anymore. And he's like, has meat 3 times a day. And he's from Atlanta, but he did tell me that the best ribs are in St. Louis. I don't know if he's just pulling the St. Louis, towing the line for St. Louis. But I talked to him on a Monday. I remember I had tickets to see. I was going with a friend to see Pearl Jam at Wrigley. It's the only time I've seen them. This is like a couple years ago.
Love it.
And I was just talking to him. I literally was like, the next thing I was doing was going to a vegan restaurant with a friend of mine who had like special diet, which I'm cool with that. And I think I mentioned it. And we're just talking about like cards. I could be like, I don't want to talk about the cards because I'm a Cubs fan. But I mean, I asked Wainwright, like, and he was injured at the time too. I said, what's it like when, I'm assuming this happened, Bob Gibson walks in the room. Now, Bob Gibson I guess, passed away about a year and a half ago, but like he was still alive in 17 or whatever I interviewed. And he's like, or no, 2019. And he's like, the room gets silent, even though like we have future Yachty and future Hall of Famers in our clubhouse. When Bob Gibson walks in, you're kind of afraid, like you're not going to say anything stupid. Because I mean, people remember him, just knocking bats out of people's hands, just being super intimidating. And then I asked him, I was like, well, I'm guessing this too, but you ever talk to John Hamm? And he's like, oh, I got stories about John Hamm. He took us all out to dinner. Whenever we play the Cubs, he's like, good luck, whip the Cubs. I hate the Cubs. And I think I put that in my headline. I got a lot more reads than I would normally would for, and, kind of end of his career, injured player, who hadn't been an all-star in a while. But he was great. Like I had nothing in common with him. We had talked for probably a half an hour. And my kid loves this. We've been to Cincinnati a couple of times. My kid loves this barbecue restaurant called the Pontiac, which is in the middle of like the Shishi part in over the Rhine. But it's like literally like you'll order ribs and wings and stuff, and you'll get the side dishes of cornbread. It's like the size of my desk. That's what that kind of place it is. We're talking about barbecue, and I was like, well, if you're ever in Cincinnati, check out the Pontiac. He's like, hold on, I got to write this down. Like he wrote down my suggestion for a barbecue place that he didn't know about. That was kind of cool. So
love it.
Yeah. So I mean, I just talked to that dude again. I have nothing in common with him probably, and we, he plays for the Cards. I'm a Cubs fan, but we had a great human conversation, and it was terrific. So,
which person in sports have you interviewed that you think has overcome the most unique set of circumstances or adversity? And tell us that story.
I mean, there's probably a couple. I talked to a guy named David Brown, who's a blind Paralympian sprinter last summer before the Paralympics. So, the kind of the Olympics end and then the Paralympic games start after that. Yep. So I was talking to him. I think he maybe was born like 80% blind, and the one eye that was working, eventually kind of went out. So a lot of few times you see a picture of him, it looks like he's wearing a sleeping mask, but it's just like a mask to kind of protect his eyes. And blind sprinters run with a tandem partner. So they've got like a tether on their, so it looks like they're running side by side with somebody who's not their coach. It's a tandem runner. And I'm talking to him, and he's like, he was cool, but he was like cocky as anybody. He's like, I'm out there to dominate and win. I have no fear. I'm gonna win another gold medal. He wasn't at all like, well, we'll have to see the competition. I mean, he was. I mean, you think, Michael Jordan's cocky, or confident. This guy's got a leg up on him. That was kind of cool to see. I'm talking to him he's on FaceTime on his phone, and I'm on my computer, and I was just, I could tell, like when you're talking to somebody who's blind on video,
yeah,
it, you're not in front of them, so you don't feel as much like you're staring at them, but then It is slightly different. There's no eye, there's like you're listening, and there's not that eye contact thing that you need to have when you're, when you're interviewing someone in person. It's just different. But I mean, he was pretty inspirational, and I was like, this guy's going to go win some medals. I wasn't like, so what's it like being blind? How does that make you feel? It's more like, who are you going to kill next week in the Paralympic Games? Because that's where he was going. That was pretty cool. So,
all right, last one I'm going to ask you about. I want to go to the book before we wrap up today. We're coming up on time.
Yeah,
Draymond Green.
Yeah.
So I'm good friends with, I think, a dear friend of his. Well, I know a dear friend of his, Benny Fowler. My good buddy Benny just retired after a very, very meaningful 8-year career in the NFL. Michigan State Spartan, Detroit Country Day grad. Shout out to Detroit Country Day, raising my children, Ava and Atlas, today here in the great state of Michigan. Benny and Draymond are dear friends.
Yeah.
I'm at Benny's wedding over Memorial Day weekend, and Draymond's there, surprisingly, in the middle of playoffs. He and a significant other They're there. I'm kind of, I felt a little starstruck because now that, I'm a transplant to Michigan, and two of my practice partners and the partner over our team, Paul Davis, and then our associate partner, David Thomas, all Michigan State grads, all Coach Izzo disciples. Here's Draymond Green, Coach Izzo disciple. I mean, he was just larger than life. He's got a podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a 4-time NBA champion, defensive MVP, a few seasons back, I think 17 or 18. I can't even remember. Defensive player of the year. I don't remember, but I mean, he's just an absolute assassin. What was it like to invest time with him? And can you share something that stood out from your interview with him?
Well, I'm guessing he's probably the same way as he was at your wedding. He's like a regular down to earth guy. I think he gets in trouble for things he says because he's just like you and me, but he's pretty laid back. He's not really sort of over concerned about, well, how should I respond to this question? Like, he just says what he says. We talk about, so Subway was doing a campaign, and he was part of it. And we talked about that. And, asking somebody about like Subway sandwich is not like the same thing as, so how do you grill a steak? I think it's a little bit more pedestrian, or could be. But he was like talking about that. And he's kind of like in the stage where I guess if you're burning 8,000 calories a day, like he is, you can eat as many sandwiches as you want. He was geeking out about all the stuff that he puts on his Subway sandwiches and whatever else he eats. But he said in the bubble when he was in the end, I guess the Warriors weren't good enough to be in the bubble, the playoffs, or that pod thing that they had in 2020. But he was kind of present, I think, for some of the games, and he was kind of saying like wherever we were, we had to kind of stay where we were. But like I had to have my fix of like normal street food and stuff I like to eat. He's not like high and fancy, and he's pretty much a nuts and bolts guy. So, and he's funny. So that's what I got out of talking to him. Just like,
I mean, you were spot on. I mean, I was at the wedding for a few hours, and I just remember, I mean, he seemed larger than life to me, but then when you're up close, it's like, no, he is the most calm, relaxed, down to earth, funny person, very welcoming, came off extremely kind. I just thought for a time where, there's some pressure and a little bit of stress, he probably handles it very well. He's obviously been there before. Yeah. But I just thought, what a class act. I love his podcast. So that's why I was just curious. I mean, and you know what, to me, you talk about, again, authenticity, which is why why are we even talking about being authentic? Right. Yeah. But what he says, like, I genuinely believe like that's him. That's exactly who he is, what his beliefs are, and how he sees in a situation, the position he takes. So that's awesome. Thanks for sharing it. Subway. Excuse me. I don't know how I feel about that, but talk to us about the book.
Yeah. So 90 Days in the 90s is a novel. It's fiction. And so I had just turned 50 this spring. So imagine it's a plot about kind of, a woman who's about my age or our age, somewhere between you and me. And, her career kind of goes awry in New York. She moves back to Chicago to take over her uncle's record store because he passed on. And she starts getting nostalgic and kind of wondering why she ever left Chicago. So some of it's a love letter to Chicago. But as you know, in Chicago, we have the red line that goes up north and south. We've got the blue line that takes us to O'Hare. We got the brown line that kind of runs, mostly on the north side of the city. And so there's the time travel machine. There's this fictional, or is it fiction? I don't know. It's a train line called the Gray Line that, there's been urban legends about it, and it takes you back in time. So she's heard about this, and she's getting kind of nostalgic and kind of thinking about like, maybe I could reboot my life and fix some things. And she's really into music, obviously, as a record store owner would be, and discovers that there's a stop under a record store and decides to, take a trip back to the 90s. And the subtext is kind of like, one of my favorite authors is Nick Hornby. He wrote About a Boy and High Fidelity and so on. Maybe it's a generational thing, but there is an interest in her, like, going back in time and fixing some things or having a do-over. But when she goes back to the 1990s, she ends up having a little bit too much fun, and that's kind of becomes sort of part of the problem, and that she doesn't deal with her stuff, and then she gets stuck back in time. So it's very Chicago heavy, very music and pop culture heavy. I don't know, maybe shorthand way to say it's like, Hot Tub Time Machine and High Fidelity, mixed up with Back to the Future with a ton of music and pop culture. And she's transported back to 1996 and has some cool stuff going on. So
where can people get the book today?
Yeah, well, obviously you can get it on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com, wherever you want to get it, wherever you shop for books normally. If you go to 90daysinthe90s.com, you can order it off me, and I'll sign a copy and send a little swag in there. I always like give away free stuff. And
I love it.
Yeah, as an author, I get to keep a little bit more of the money. With Amazon, they obviously take a big cut. The cool part is Amazon and some of the bigger retailers, they do like broadcast your book out there, so more people can get it. So if you're in the US, I'd just say go to 90daysinthe90s.com. And get your copy of the book right away. And I think it's going to be anybody who loves pop culture. It's actually not science fiction. It's science fiction light, I would say. But if you love American pop culture, whether you're into grunge or punk or even pop music, I think you'll probably like it.
I find that, well, number one, let's acknowledge the website is actually directly over Andy's left shoulder in the background, right? So, when he says 90daysinthe90s.com, it makes it sound like no big deal. You should know if it's, numbers or letters, but it's right over his shoulder. Number two, though, I find that we will, as humans, will deprive ourselves of things we look forward to and would even enjoy because we think we lack time. Can you quantify for our listeners about how long of a read is it if you really sit down and dive into it?
I don't know. I think I had a couple of people who got it, pre-ordered it, so they got it through it in 2 days. But I know both of those people off the top of my head are pretty diehard music people. I think it's the ultimate rock and roll novel. I think it's the ultimate novel about Chicago. If you like Chicago, ever been to Chicago? And it's the ultimate novel about the 90s. So it's definitely like, my wife and my dad read my bio, and he's like, he's reading about my bio, how I got to interview Alice in Chains and Oasis and Morrissey, the English singer from the 60s. He's like, I've never heard of any of these artists. I'm like, well, you're 78. Of course you haven't. But he told me last week, he's like, actually, I know nothing about the music, but I'm enjoying reading this. So I guess that means it's fairly easy to read. I don't try to be all complicated. And I had a couple of really good editors that kind of said, bring it down, focus on the reader. Because, just like sales, it's about your audience. You got to appreciate your audience because that's who your partner is. So that's where the 5 years that I spent writing the book, I had this 120,000 word thing. And someone's like, that's great that you want to share all this, but think about your readers. So I just made it like, a straight up story about time travel with a heavy dose of pop culture. And, you don't have to know, I don't know, Fugazi's, latest album to understand it. I make fun of, there's a couple of bands I make fun of Phil Collins a little bit and people who like, his movie soundtrack career type of music. But I think there's something for everybody. I think it's an enjoyable read. I definitely loved writing it. The feedback I'm getting is, I didn't realize how fun the 90s were. And people tell me that's what they enjoy about the book. So
love it. 90daysinthe90s.com. And don't forget, he said he'd sign it and drop it in the mail to you. Andy, I have to acknowledge the fact that I was almost choking on my last word when I asked you to speak about the book. Oh. And as my young son, Atlas Kai Amezcua says, the only drink I should keep in my office is San Pellegrino. So this is a shout out to San Pellegrino. You just saved my life from choking. On behalf of Atlas and myself, thank you. Andy, sports writer, author, 90 Days in the 90s. It's been awesome being together again. Loved hearing the stories. You're a great storyteller. You know that.
Well, I try. I'm a good anecdote teller.
Really enjoyed it.
I got to like 4 at the same time. That's the problem. So
let's do it again soon. Andy Frye, Frye. He's still a Chicagoan. Love it, man. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Manny. Good talking to you.